Welcome back to the Kicks and Picks podcast. Coach Steve here with Nick and Scotty. We're back after a so-so week. We went 5-5 last week, just about a third of a unit down. So not too bad in terms of money lost, but we certainly pride ourselves on putting up winning records the last few weeks in a row before that. So, guys, not the way we wanted to turn out, but still in the end, after I think we started, had to be like 1-4, we bounced back pretty nicely. So solid week in terms of just keeping things steady, so to speak.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it. I want to credit us for the incredible self-awareness. I think I told you guys all week of recording that I was going to go 0-3 because every line I took was a trap line. Well, that turned out to be very true in England, with Aston Villa laying the biggest egg you've ever seen. And who screwed us against Everton? I'm so mad I forgot about it already.
Was against
Brighton.
Everton.
Was Wolves?
Brighton not getting it done against Everton. We obviously had the debacle in the Spurs game with all of the VAR and the red cards. So that would have been an impossible game to handicap, even, no matter who you took. If you took Chelsea, It's not like you could take credit for it, right? It's just one of those bananas fucking games. But you said it, Coach. Before that, we had 4 straight weeks of 6 wins or more, 7 wins in 3 out of those 4 weeks. So trending in the right direction. I think our reads, our analysis, it's been where it needs to be, and we're going to continue to do that.
Yeah, and the season total still very positive for us. 59, 49, and 2, up 10.1 units. So can't scoff at that. We're very happy with that performance so far.
And remember, we had a 1-9 week sandwiched in there somewhere. So like if you take out that disaster of a week and we're up 15 units or more.
You could also take out my picks, and we're up 18 units. So
I don't like to do that.
It's close.
We weren't trying to do that to you, Scotty, but you
Listen,
did it to yourself there.
Nick started the episode by saying we're very self-aware. I'm very self-aware. And as much as Nick says we can't take credit for the Chelsea and Spurs, or you can't take credit for the Chelsea-Spurs match if you took Chelsea, I can take credit for that match actually happening, because I knew going into Monday after Liverpool had drawed Luton Town that Spurs were 100% going to drop points, and knowing that my 0-2 week was riding on a Spurs moneyline pick, I was almost certain that was going to go the other way. So I will take credit for that. If I had known that Liverpool were going to drop points this weekend, I absolutely would have taken Chelsea, because that's always what happens. But life goes on. We learn from our mistakes, or maybe we don't, and I'll continue to take Tottenham. But you guys are carrying the load, so it doesn't look so bad for me.
Yeah, it was interesting because last week I made my picks last, and not to pat myself on the back, but I went 3-0, and I had to do a lot of digging to find those picks. You guys jumped on the ones that stood out. This week I ended up picking first because I got
Coach is getting kind of cocky though, because in the group chat he's
like,
"Oh, I left those 4 picks for you guys because I really liked it, but I knew you would like them too, so I just kept going." So we're getting cocky, Coach, now.
There was also a lot to like out there this week, which is I felt like I didn't have to dig so much, which makes me a little skittish, because last week when those lines that you guys took jumped out, like I would have been all over the Brighton and Villa lines too, and probably some of the others that you guys were on. And because you got to them first, I had to dig, and I had to, go to Germany and Spain and France, which aren't usually our wheelhouse of where we bet. But I was able to dig up some winners. And now this week there was so much out there that I'm like, well, I could pick these 3, and there's still 3 more I would have picked if someone beat me to them. So be curious to see how this week turns out because of that.
Yeah, well, the good news is I have my bet the mortgage lock of the century in this week's picks. So stay tuned for that. It's my second pick in the hat trick of picks. It's a guaranteed winner. I might put down my life savings on this because it's just free money.
All right. Well, we'll have to wait for that one. So this week we're going to feature the Derby della Capitale in Italy. It's Roma Lazio. Obviously, for Nick and I, that is one of the matches that's closest to our hearts during the season. Every season, if you're at all familiar with that derby, it sometimes means more to the fan bases there than almost anything else, even finishing in the top 4. I won't say Scudetto because they're both Scudetto starved, but like sometimes it's if you beat Lazio or if you beat Roma, it kind of makes or breaks your season, huh, Nick?
It's loser fan behavior is what it is. Let's just call it what it like. There's no other way to sugarcoat it. If we joke about it with each other and with other friends, right? I say it to my Roma fan friends all the time, like, you guys you brag about stupid thing. Who won the derby? Who finished higher in the table? Yeah. Like, cool. Cool, bro. Like 6th and 7th, right? Like 3 out of the last 5 years.
You guys
like
wish
that.
it's 6th and 7th right now.
Right.
Aspirational.
Well, and that's probably what makes this derby the most important in terms of just bragging rights, because both teams have been so bad, and we'll get into that. Like, normally we're talking like, oh, this might have an impact on the top 4 race when these teams play, especially the second half of the season. Oftentimes, we'll get into it, but I mean, it's got to be the lowest these two sides have been in the table at the same time, at least like 12 matches into the season in a derby, and I don't even know how long. Like, you probably have to like really dig through the record books, because usually at least one of these two sides is closer to top 4 at this point in the season.
Yeah, and the good news is it looks like the books are pretty confused by it too. Going through the odds right now, moneyline Lazio is at plus 170, Roma plus 150, draws plus 205. So everything is basically pretty even there. It's just about a coin flip. Lazio draw no bet plus 100, Roma minus 130. And the total over 2.5 is plus 125, under 2.5 minus 165. So looking like it's going to be, as expected, a goals at a premium kind of match. As we talked about, Roma coming into this in 7th place on 17 points. Pretty happy with their season, at least it seems so far on Twitter, even though the results don't necessarily show it as much. And Lazio in 10th place on 16 points. And if you follow Nick on Twitter, their season is a complete disaster, and Sadi should be fired, 3 weeks ago.
All facts.
So I guess 3 years ago. So I guess, guys, coming into this, I mean, it's like you said, Coach, the form has been not great for either side. I mean, it almost kind of feels like this could be a launching point for one of the two clubs. You'd like to think that maybe a derby win can kind of propel them forward and start pushing up into those Champions League spots, or at least competing for them with the upper echelon right now in Serie A. Where do you guys see this going? Do you think it's going to be as tightly contested as the books have it right now, or do you think that one of these sides, whether it's Lazio, which I'm going to guess Nick is going to say no, or Roma, have a little bit of an edge considering where they're at in the season?
I think one edge, and both these teams are playing in Europe this week, right? Lazio played today. It's Tuesday. They got to win against Feyenoord at home. Don't have to travel. Roma has to travel to Prague and play Thursday. Lunchtime kickoff, Eastern US. So it's the earlier of the two, sets of matches on Thursday, but still travel involved. I know Mourinho already complained a couple weeks ago about Roma having to play a Sunday after Thursday, never getting the Monday match. I think that does play into it a little bit. I also think Roma's approach has been generally, sit pretty compact and then try to hit on the counterattack. Roma is getting some key players back in these recent weeks. Dybala came back and played all 96, 97 minutes with stoppage time on Sunday, which shocked me because he hadn't played in about a month. But he was given all clear by the doctors, and him staying in that match for the entirety ended up being pivotal because he had the winning assist. Renato Sanchez is back, and he hasn't played much, but he could be a spark plug in the midfield off the bench. I think it's someone who can drive the ball, which most of the rest of the Roma midfield can't do. There's some decent pieces there, but he adds a different dimension. They're saying any of Lorenzo Pellegrini, Leonardo Spinazzola, Chris Smalling could all be back in some way, shape, or form. And if that happens, then Mourinho actually has a bench to work with, which could maybe affect the way he, sets this match up. I do think, though, with the system Roma plays with the 3-man back line, they're going to try to keep it scoreless early on, or, scoreless in the sense of not conceding. They tend to do a pretty decent job of that. I mean, you saw even against Inter, they held Inter scoreless for a long time. That was at the San Siro. This is technically Lazio's home derby, but obviously, just like with the Milan derby, unlike in other countries where like Liverpool and Everton, there's actually a home field advantage. City, United, there's a home field advantage. There really is no home field advantage for this one.
Except Roma will have more fans, which they always do.
I mean, you would think Lazio would have more because they are allocated more tickets as their home match, but we'll see. Roma probably really only gets a Curva Sud, but Roma does draw with the last couple of years of Mourinho. But that being said, I do think the approach from Roma is going to be pretty tight early, but that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to see a low-scoring game, because I think if either side hits early, the other side's going to have to really open up more, and that could open up for more goals. Last year, there were 2 1-0 derby wins by Lazio. The year before, there was a 3-0 Roma win and a 3-2 Lazio win. So the scoreline, I think, really could go any which way. But I do think both sides will be a little tight to start because of where they are in the standings. I don't think either is going to feel like they can take too many risks early on.
Yeah. Listen, we talked about loser fan mentality. Let's talk about loser coach mentality, because these guys are going back and forth with who has played more games, who's more injured, excuses. They're both right, but it doesn't make it sound any less whiny or complainy. So like last week, for instance, Lazio played the game on Monday against Fiorentina. Then they played that same Friday against Bologna, right? And then they played today in the Champions League. So a lot of fixture congestion. I think fatigue is setting in for Lazio, as it always does, right? They started the season with fatigue. They had like 3 or 4 games where they looked kind of okay, and now we're watching Sadi get into Sadi mode, where he's not rotating players. He knows who he likes. He knows who he thinks is performing. Results have obviously been mixed, and I think that's going to be an issue. But to answer your question, Scott, I think this match for me is going to buck the trend a little bit. I think it's going to be a more wide open game than they have been recently, because both teams are going to want to go for it. Both teams realistically have nothing to lose at this point, right? Like they're still fighting for Europe, of course, but 3 points isn't going to make or break your season in this game the same way that it typically does. I think that, if somebody will take a moral victory out of it, right? If you go all out and you lose 3-2, you could say, hey, we gave it our best shot. I don't know. Like, I just kind of get that sense more than like the 1-0 snooze fest that it's been for the past like year and a half.
So if you guys think it's going to be a bit more open, seems like that would point towards Roma having the edge, given that they've got 22 goals scored on the season compared to Lazio's 13. If we look at something like a team total with Roma, over 1.5 is plus 165. Is that really good value then?
I mean, I don't think it's a bad bet personally. I think both numbers are very playable depending on who you like. I think the Roma play is probably better because of what you said. Lukaku has been outstanding since he's been there. I think he has 8 goals in 10 games or 8 goals in 11 games, something like that. Coach mentioned it. Dybala's back. That's huge. And Roma's found the way. They've dug deep. They've gotten late results. They've gotten goals as of late. And you just said it, Scotty. Lazio has 13 goals on the season. That's not cutting it after, 10 weeks? I don't know. What is this, week 11?
Yes, so, this is week 12.
Week 12, yeah. I mean, that's fucking putrid. There's just no excuse for it. They need to start finding goals. I think eventually they will, but this is a perfect time to do it. They're just not getting it done. So Roma might be the play if you're looking at a team total.
And I have to say, I mean, as someone who's been following this match very closely for, almost 2 decades now, at least in the last 5-6 years, this is the first time Roma's had a real clear edge in the goal scoring category, I think, right? Normally Lazio with Ciro Immobile there has had the better goal scorer, out and out striker. Since Dzeko's prime kind of ended, he had that one, capo season for Roma. And then Ciro moved in, I think, a year or 2 later for Lazio. Like, Lazio's had the clear edge in the goal scoring category. Also with Milinkovic-Savic in the midfield, could always chip him in. And now you look, and Lukaku is far and away the best striker in this matchup, head to head on Sunday. He's been absolutely outstanding. He still gets a lot of respect in the anytime goal scorer number, which is something I would keep an eye on. They haven't released those numbers yet, but I've bet him quite a bit this season, or even if it's a match that I think Roma could win, which is not so much in this match, but like a player parlay where it's like Roma to win and Lukaku to score. There's been a lot of value this season. I've been doing really well in Roma team totals this year, because most of the time they do score 2 goals this season, which is kind of bucking the trend in the Mourinho area, because we know last year they were an under team so often. And I've bet that quite a few times, including on Sunday against Lecce. It took 95 minutes to get it, but it hit. And it's been hitting quite often. I didn't bet it obviously against Inter because I didn't expect 2 goals against Inter. But when I see plus 165, I think there's a lot of value there, especially if you have Dybala and Lukaku both starting, and you have the potential of some of these other guys off the bench, like an El Shaarawy. I mean, Azmoun scored his first goal. Maybe he's got a little confidence. Belotti's been good. I think there's some space there for a bet, because at plus 165, that's one of those things I could bet it. They only score once, or for some reason they have a really bad match, no score. I could live with plus 165.
Yep.
I definitely think that's something to keep an eye on. Also, Nick mentioned Roma scoring a lot late. And back in that with a stat that I saw after the Lecce match, in the first 11 matches of the season, Roma has scored 9 goals from the 76th minute on, which is the most in the league, which it's not something I normally bet, but just like looking at like those goal band bets, right?
I love when I say stuff, and sometimes I'm just making it up, but then Coach Steve comes in and backs it up with stats. Like, that's my favorite.
Depending on how this match starts to play out, if you want to look at it, I'm pretty sure you could bet these live, the goal bands, right? Most of the time.
I don't know. Never tried.
If you have to bet it before the match, even if you think Roma can keep pulling them, out in the last 15 minutes of the match, it's plus 115 for either team to score between the 76th and full time. So that's even something that I've never looked at before. But after what they did this past week and seeing the trend of how Roma's played this season, and that's one thing I have complimented Mourinho on repeatedly on my other podcast, is that he has completely changed the mentality of the side, that they don't capitulate if they give up a goal to a smaller side and fall behind in the second half. They just keep pushing to the end.
And I'm sorry, what I'll say is that's my biggest criticism of Sadi. I've said it here. I've said it on any show I've ever been on. I've said it on Twitter. When Lazio goes down, they don't show that same fight. I'm struggling to remember a game where they've pushed and gotten goals in the 80th minute or later, right? Certainly if they were behind or tied, right? When they're up, they don't have a problem, but the mentality is probably my biggest criticism of Sadi, certainly this year. So I think that's a huge problem. So I think everything kind of backs up with what you're saying, Coach.
Which means that the other thing I was going to say today, score first.
But definitely have to. I think they do to get a result here. And even today, they beat Feyenoord 1-0, which is a massive win for them. To a team that smoked them just 2 weeks ago. They scored a great goal. Cheeto scored a nice goal. They didn't really create an awful lot outside of that. So, like the Sarriball, as everybody has, told me exists, right, for the past 10 years, like that, I still haven't seen it, at least not this year.
Yeah, so I guess that's a good way to segue into our next piece here. I mean, we talked about it. Both teams are relatively in a similar point in the table with, 17 points for Roma, 16 for Lazio. I think coming into the season, expectations for each club were probably pretty similar, or at least where they, fans hoped that they would be at the end of the season. But with this match, do you feel like there's one side that really needs this win more than the other? Like, do you feel that Lazio really could use this win? And based off of, like I said, vibes coming off of Twitter, it certainly seems like they're in need of some good news. Obviously, the win in Champions League this week helps. But do you think that this is more of a must win for one club versus the other?
I think it's more of a must win for Lazio, just on the way they've started the year, the points they've dropped. And it follows the pattern, right? Like, can't beat Lecce, can't beat, Genoa, but go out and beat Atalanta, beat Fiorentina, beat Napoli, right? So, like, beating Roma kind of like falls right within the trend of what Sadi's been able to do. I definitely think they need it just from a player confidence standpoint. I think a lot of guys have struggled to get going. Luis Alberto, for me, has been probably their best, most consistent player this season. Immobile's been struggling. Zaccagni is nowhere near where he was last year. Pedro has looked okay. He's coming in off the bench a lot. But the new guys that they've brought in, they're all struggling. Kamada can't really see game time. He hasn't looked good when he's been in there. Isaacson, I don't think is featured in like 5 weeks. He can't seem to do anything. Tati Castellanos, it's the guy that was in La Liga last year. I think he had double-digit goals. He's really struggled to adapt. He's looked okay, but his finishing has been really poor. So I think just from a keep the players believing standpoint, Lazio needs a result out of this game.
Yeah, you see, I look at it the other way. And I think this is kind of beauty's in the eye of the beholder, right? Both our clubs need the win. I think both of them desperately need a win like this. And I think from a Roma perspective, it's the opposite. They haven't been able to beat either of the big sides they've played so far. They've lost to both Milan clubs. Those are the only big matches they've had so far, so to speak, in terms of club stature. They've also dropped points to Genoa. Genoa just owns the Roman clubs at this point this season, right? We could just call that what it is. And then they've dropped points to Verona, and they dropped a couple points to Salernitana off of a couple wonder goals by Candreva. So they've dropped too many points already, and I think they need to find a way to beat a quote-unquote bigger side, a European competing club, to kind of build some momentum, because if you get into December, if you're Roma, without a win against a big side, I'm just going to tell you who they play come just about Christmas time. This is their fixture list. So after this, they have Udinese at home, Sassuolo away. Then it's Fiorentina home, Bologna away, Napoli home, Juve away, Atalanta home, Milan away in consecutive weeks. With
Could be
Coppa
the end of Mourinho.
Italia, right? Coppa Italia, Europa League mixed
That's
in.
it.
So I think from the perspective of Roma just needs to beat a quality side in terms of a side that's also competing for Europe to get a little momentum. Maybe they could beat Lazio, Udinese, and Sassuolo, back to back, ideally, and string together some wins before you get into that stretch, because you're bound to drop points in at least a few of those matches. And those head-to-heads come up big. So say Roma and Lazio are even competing for 6th place and a Europa League spot next year, right? Yeah. There's even a prestige difference between playing in Europa League and playing in Conference League to some extent. So this is, I think, if you ask both fan bases, you'll get the same answer, that their club needs to win more. But that's why I see it for Roma. They need a win against a top 7 type side.
I'll reiterate what I said. I don't think it's a make or break game, but I think it's a springboard game, right? Like a win in this game could turn the season around. I think that's maybe what you asked, Scott.
Yeah. And so if we're basically deadlocked here, where we say both clubs really need this win, going into a derby like this, it usually means that there's going to be, one guy that's going to step up. So maybe I'll ask for each of your clubs, like, who is that guy, or maybe who should that guy be that's going to step up and have a standout performance and maybe carry the team to victory? Coach, you want to start?
I'm going to go Lukaku. I think you could also pinpoint Dybala and some of these other guys, but I think just based on his form, and Sunday could have been one of those matches that kind of derailed him for a few weeks because he missed that penalty kick in the first 5 minutes of the match. Had one chance saved by Falcone, like a kick save somewhere around mid-second half, and it looked like Roma was going to end up dropping points. And it was like, wow, like they're going to drop 3 points to let you at home ahead of the derby after dropping points to Inter. And a big part of it's because Lukaku didn't bury a penalty kick in like the 5th minute. And then, that was one of those things, not that it would put the match to bed, but it would have put Roma on really good footing early on, and they probably would have found a second, and I think would have, in some ways, cruised to victory. And he scored what eventually turned out to be the winner in the 95th minute. And it was, the celebration was almost like he felt vindication for that goal. Like he got that monkey off his back that kind of jumped on there after he missed the penalty kick, because all of a sudden now all the pressure is there. Like, if we don't win this match, it's probably my fault. And we know that sometimes these strikers can have that mentality where like it kind of eats at them a bit. And I think if that hadn't gone his way, maybe he's mentally not right for this match. But I think now he's coming in feeling really good about himself. He'll probably play Thursday against Sparta Prague, or Slavia Prague rather. And he's got an outstanding record in the Europa League already this year. He's, I think, going back to his time at Chelsea, he scored or United, whichever club it was that they were playing Europa League last, he scored like 9 straight Europa League matches or something. So I think he's going to come in with confidence. And I think because of that, and I think physically, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, Nick, if I look at the center backs playing for Lazio with Casale out, I think Romagnoli and Patrick, he can manhandle them a bit. I don't think so. Romagnoli's decent, but I don't think he's physically can match him man for man if he puts himself in good positions.
He's been nothing short of fantastic for the past year and a half. He's been in the league for, I don't know what, 7-8 years now. Yeah. So, he'll be up to the challenge, but it's going to be a tall task, certainly, like you said, without Casale there. So we'll see. And then for us, I think it's going to have to be somebody on the forward line, right? I mentioned Luis Alberto. I think he finished the game today because Lazio were out of subs, but he was limping towards the last 5 minutes of that matchup. He could potentially be out for this game, which would be, Saudi not rotating and that kind of fixture congestion we spoke about. So that would be devastating. So they're going to need to get something from somebody up front. I don't know who it is. I don't really care who it is. It's really going to depend on who starts. I think if Immobile starts, which he's probably earned after the goal today, he's going to need to be the guy to make something happen. I know Pedro is featured pretty heavily in this fixture, on both sides, but he's been strong for us, and we're going to need something from moment of magic from a winger or something from Immobile, turn back the clock.
Yeah, and I guess maybe the flip side of this is if we're talking about guys who can or should step up. It's obviously it's a derby, so emotions will be running high. There's going to be a lot on the line, as we talked about. Both clubs really needing this win. we don't have the card props up yet, but do you guys see a lot of cards in this? And even more so, we have down here, the question is, will we finish the match with 22 players on the pitch? I'm going to expand that. Will we finish the match with 22 players on the pitch and both managers still on the sideline?
Well, that's the caveat too. I was going to say before
I
you
don't think so.
threw it in there.
I think a coach will get red carded. I will go out on a limb and say that.
I think if one of these teams gets off to a rough start and the manager starts feeling the heat, I could see either of them getting sent off if things go really awry really fast. We don't have Roger Ibanez around anymore, so that might increase the chances of 22 men on the pitch. But in terms of card, I think we will see a bunch of cards because it's going to get physical. It's going to be intense. Both teams really need this match, and the atmosphere is always indicative of like a really intense physical match. 8 of the last 9 derbies have gone over 4.5 cards. Yep. 3 reds in last season, second head-to-head, 1 by Ibanez early, 2 late, 1 by it was Cristante, and I forget which Lazio player, but there was a Lazio player and Cristante both got redded at the end of the match. And both teams tend to get a lot of cards this season too. I mean, Roma's over 4.5 and 4 out of 5, Lazio in 7 out of 8. That probably plays into this, right? I do see cards.
If the number is 5.5 and it's anything remotely playable, I would say like minus 130 or better. That's a bet I would make. Absolutely. So to answer your question, I do not believe we will finish with all players, all coaches.
Yeah, and just another trend to throw in there, since we're on the kind of the trends with the cards, corners. I was doing some digging earlier, and the last 7 derbies have been under 10.5 corners, which is indicative of like a tightly contested match in the midfield where neither team wants to give much up and go too far forward. If they follow that trend this season too, Roma's under 10.5 cards and 4 out of 5, Lazio in 8 out of 9. Not what I would have pictured from Lazio, because I always think of them as more of an attacking side. You think of Sarriball pushing the tempo a bit. It has not been the case this year.
Yeah, so the one thing I'll say, there were 15 corners in the Lazio game today with Feyenoord. Lazio did actually have 9 corners themselves, so that was like pretty wild. I was shocked that the last however many games you just said were under 10.5. I will say the over is 8.5. So that's like a tricky number, right?
Yeah.
Like could there still be 9 or 10? I think there could be, but like under 8.5 was like, I don't know, plus 130 or something like that. So it's like it's kind of an in-between number. I mean, if you can, I don't really know what to make of it. I think there could be 9 corners in this game. I just can't say I would recommend a bet based on the trends that you mentioned.
Yeah. It's interesting too, because I'm looking here on DraftKings, and the over 8.5 is minus 125. The under now is at minus 110, but team corners, they have Roma set at 3.5 at minus 160 for the over, and Lazio set at 4.5 at minus 125. So that seems to indicate that they expect a little more attacking impetus from Lazio, I guess. Yeah. They might get it that extra.
Like I said, 9 themselves today, and they didn't have very many scoring chances, so I don't know how they got 9.
All right, so we've pretty much capped this game to its fullest. I'll wrap it up with this. If I give you guys each a free money line wager, because obviously my picks have been poor, I need to get some money back, so I'm going to back you guys. Where are you putting that money line wager? Are you going, Lazio money line? You taking Roma money line, or do you think the draw line is a good play here?
If it was free, the draw line is great. Absolutely, I would go with that because I'll try to get the most bang for your buck. I am going to say that there's 2 Nick schools of thought here. There's Nick's school of thought A, follow the odds, and that is to take Roma, right? They're plus 150. They're the favorites. You go where the odds tell you. Nick's school of thought 2, derby game, anything can happen. You kind of go with the worst team, with the underdog, with the better value. That's Lazio. So I'm not really giving you an answer. I've now said all 3 things. But I mean, like absolutely gun to my head, you go with the odds, you take Roma. I think that's the free money line bet.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how Thursday's going to play out in Prague, but I think Roma is going to be coming in with a little momentum because of the way that Lecce match ended. And, I am biased a little bit. I will admit that. But I do like the number on Roma at plus 150, even as the favorite. When you get the favorite at plus 150, if you think that team has a good chance of winning, like that's a number you take.
And I'm also on like a 3 or 4 derby special, or like games with Roma and Milan and some others, like where I always bet against, like I say to bet against Lazio, and Lazio winds up winning. So I'm sticking with that strategy here.
And Roma's kind of due here. I mean, they've lost 3 derbies in a row. That, or rather,
Oh,
I'm sorry, no,
God.
back to back.
Out. They're due.
There it is.
Back to back. 3 of the last 4, I should say.
I've trained him so well. Yeah, Saudi owns this derby so far.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, I'm not the expert by any means, but if I'm just looking at the book's lines, I kind of agree with Nick's original point where the draw line really feels really good. The total being set, pretty heavily under. I know we think there's goals, but if the books are confident in it, it could be a 1-1, maybe 0-0 type affair that, usually the way these things go.
Yep.
And interesting enough, the draw line hasn't hit. Just to throw it out there, I just wanted to look because I was curious myself. It hasn't hit since January 2020. So it's been 6 derbies straight without a draw.
Yeah. Oh, it's the doest.
All right. Well, that'll wrap up the derby recap for Lazio and Roma. Now we will shift gears into our hat trick of picks. Again, we were 5-5 last week, minus 0.3 units. So definitely looking for a little bit of a bounce back. Not that 5-5 is bad by any means, but I think we were on a 4-week run of winning weeks. Yep. So, listen, I'll kick it off because we'll get my garbage picks out of the way. I took Tottenham money line last week. It obviously did not work out well. It was a bit of a debacle with Chelsea on Monday. I'm going back to the well here that I'm taking them again. Tottenham money line plus 115 at Wolves. I mean, at this point, all eyes are going to be on Tottenham this weekend. They lost a lot, not just the match on Monday. They also lost Van de Ven to looks like a pretty bad hamstring injury. They lost Christian Romero to a red card suspension, so he's going to be out for the next 3 matches. They also lost Udogie on a red card, 2 yellows, so he's going to be out on this one. Madison picked up an ankle injury, which it's undetermined how serious that is. But he could be out, and which is going to be probably the biggest loss of the 4. He's really been important to them up top. Today it came out that Richarlison has been playing through injury and might be getting surgery. So I'm going to go ahead and assume that he's not going to be available for this one. Not that that's that big of a loss given his form this season. So it's really looking like Tottenham against the world now. I mean, they were league leaders, up until this point, scoring 2 goals in pretty much every single match. And now, within just the span of one, London derby, it seems like their season is on a tipping point where it could be falling apart very, very soon. So for me, I think with everything on the line and them really needing a win in the worst way, not because, they're short on points, but because the belief around this club is going to take a nosedive if they lose to Wolves with everything that they're dealing with. I think I kind of have to back them. Wolverhampton, they haven't been great. Really, there's not a whole lot of motivation for them here because they're not quite in a relegation battle. Really, all they have to do is beat up on those bottom half of the table teams, and they'll be fine. But they also haven't been great. They've lost their fair share of matches. I think their defense has been pretty suspect all season long. They've ridden Pedro Neto and Hwang Hee-chan to quite a few points, but I think the bulk of Tottenham's attack between Son and Kulusevski and Brennan Johnson looked okay against Chelsea. I think those guys will be enough to get the win versus Wolverhampton. So I'll take Tottenham money line at plus 115 for my first lock.
Love it.
All right, I'm going over to Seti out for my first one, and it's Bologna double chance minus 130 at Fiorentina. Doing this one in Nick's honor after they beat his boys last week, his new club beating his old club. One thing that's been lost in all of the talk about some of the struggles of the big sides like the Romas, the Lazios, even Milan coming off a rough result. A couple of the teams dropped points recently, is the fact that Bologna's been outstanding. The Rosa Blue haven't lost since the opening match.
Lost on who, Steve? Because I believe followers of this show are well aware of Bologna.
Well, yeah, I mean, in the general media, right? In the mainstream media and everything you see is
flying under the radar, 100%.
Yeah, it's flying under the radar. The fact that they're sitting in 6th place. They haven't lost since the opening match week against Milan. Since then, Thiago Motta's side has won 4 and drawn 6 in the league, while also eliminating Verona from the Coppa Italia last week. That makes 11 straight without a loss. Meanwhile, Fiorentina struggling. Viola have now lost 3 straight in the league and were shut out in all 3, including against Empoli, which is the one that kind of started that whole downward spiral. I like Bologna to continue their unbeaten run. I don't know if they'll win in Florence. Maybe the Fiorentina finds something in this one. But the fact that Bologna is unbeaten in 11 and they're playing a struggling Fiorentina side, I love the fact
I'm going to have to go back and I'm gonna have to go back and clip the episode last week when Park the Bus came on, and I told you guys this could be the fucking demise of Fiorentina if they lose 3 in a row, and everybody fought me. And now here's Steve picking against Fiorentina just the very next week. So pretty interesting, Scott, wouldn't you say?
It's interesting, especially because Coach is never wrong in his picks right now. So I'm inclined to have to believe him.
The hottest capper there is, right? So just saying. I do like the pick. I'm going to go to AC Milan, money line -135 at Lecce. I think a couple of things happened last week. Milan got the worst result of the weekend, losing to Udinese, who previously had not won a game. And then Lecce obviously blew that 1-0 lead in the 80th minute. I don't know the exact moment of the first goal, Steve, but I know it was into the 80th minute and they were up 1-0 to Roma.
They were both in stoppage time.
Oh, there you go. The 90th minute. So that was a fucking disaster. So I think this is the perfect storm of these teams meeting, especially after Milan got that win over PSG, and a pretty convincing win, if we're being honest. I think Donnarumma made a couple of really good saves to keep that game close after PSG went up 1-0. So Milan is going to want to ride that form. They're going to have some of the confidence back after last weekend. -135, way too good of a number against a Lecce team. So we're going to take Milan.
Nick's backing Chances FC right now. Hope that works out for you. All right. My second pick, as promised at the top of the episode. This is my Bet the Mortgage lock of the century.
Stu Feiner edition.
I don't know what the rules are for our hat trick of picks, but if I could make this a 10-unit play for myself and get myself back into even money, I would. It's Manchester City money line at Chelsea. It's -135, so it's not like the sexiest of numbers, but it's absolutely insane given the two clubs involved. Like Chelsea is not good still. Like they beat Tottenham, but they needed everything to go their way in order to even get close. They were playing 9-man Tottenham level 1-1 purely because Cole Palmer banked in a penalty kick. It was very close to missing that. And they struggled for, 50 some odd minutes on the pitch to get that second goal. And obviously once they got that second goal, I think it was like in the 75th, close to the 80th minute, then they were able to put in 2 more, following that. But, Chelsea, they're the same Chelsea that they've been all season long. Nicholas Jackson had a hat trick, but he also had at least a hat trick of misses. Really, the only reason why he had that hat trick was for whatever reason Tottenham kept playing a high line despite only having 9 men on the field. So Sterling was able to make runs in behind and pretty much tee it up for Nicholas Jackson at will. City, on the other hand, look like they're back. I think they just came off of a 6-1 routing of Bournemouth. Doku looks unbelievable. I've been trying to pump him up on this podcast and tell people, take him for anytime goal scorer or assist because he's been sitting around like +170. He looks the real deal. He's going to be terrorizing the Premier League next to Haaland for probably the next decade, which kind of sucks. But I think City are going to roll over Chelsea on this one. So this
3-0 win today too, right? Didn't they put up 3 goals today?
Yes. Yeah. Against Young Boys. Yes. So this is going to be great. I mean, you can basically bet the house on this. It's a 75% ROI, even though it's only, the numbers is what it is. It's still a pretty good return. You'll be able to put your feet up probably by like the 30th minute or so and enjoy a nice 2-0, lead for the next 60 minutes and maybe even more. I don't see Chelsea getting more than a goal in this one. And I'm guessing City are going to put up at least 3.
All right. I'm going to France, league leaders Nice, +115 at Montpellier. I've cashed Nice 2 weeks running, including last week as one of my locks, and can't believe that the league leaders are still getting plus money odds at the 13th place side in the league. And get this, Nice has actually been better on the road than at home this season. 4 wins, 1 draw against 3 wins, 3 draws at home. Maybe this is a match where they finally slip up after playing so well, but I'm not passing up +110 in what looks to be a fairly lopsided match based on the first 11 weeks of the season. It's just too good of a number to pass up.
Hey, you take the odds they give you, right? So I'm going to do the same thing. We're going to go with the roller coaster team, Atalanta, who, we take 1 week, then we fade, then we take, then we fade. We've cashed them a couple weeks in a row, I feel like. So they are -105 on the money line to Udinese. Mentioned Udinese just got their first win. They do have a new manager. It is, I guess, kind of a tricky game in that situation. But Atalanta have been taking care of business against the lower teams for years. I think they continue to do that here. -105, way too good to pass. Scamacca has been much better. Lookman's starting to look good. Coop Miners is still doing his thing. They have to make short work of Udinese here. It's good. Like, they must be seeing this as a must win.
Yeah, I like it. This was one of the ones I left out there. Actually, both of your first two picks, Milan and Atalanta, were both on my radar. I left them out there, went with my worldwide stats, as you call it. But I was going to say, keep an eye on the Scamacca number 2. I liked him last week. He ended up scoring against Inter at, I think he was like plus 3 something when he scored. Or plus
I don't know that he's going to be that good this week. He'll probably be in like the plus 120 range, if I had to guess.
Right. I will close things out. I'll take a pick that Coach definitely wasn't looking at because it gets a little creative. I'm going with Newcastle money line and the over 1.5 total parlay. Newcastle's at Bournemouth. So that parlay together ends up being about even money. It's minus 105. I know that right now Newcastle found themselves in a similar pinch as Tottenham and as far as injuries and availability is concerned. But I think in this case, Newcastle have enough to kind of handle it where Tottenham's depth still isn't quite there. Bournemouth are pretty miserable themselves. As mentioned in my last pick, they're coming off that 6-1 dismantling by City, where their defense looked to be as useless as anything I've seen. On the flip side, Newcastle, I think Anthony Gordon is starting to show signs that his development is kind of back on track. Came over to Newcastle from Everton for, I think it was like a 60 million pound move. Is a similar transfer fee, if not maybe larger, as Tonali, which is pretty insane to think about, but he's been really good getting behind the lines. He certainly has the pace to cause backlines trouble. So I think that's a good sign. Then obviously Almiron continues to be a legitimate goal threat down that right wing. So they still have enough firepower to score goals in bunches. And I think they can get at least 2 here against Bournemouth. So even though they're short staffed, they should have more than enough to get the win here. And I like them to get a couple goals. So minus 105 is a good line to get them both at.
All right, I'm going back to Spain this week with the same team that I cashed with last week. It's Real Betis. This time it's a double chance, minus 140 at Sevilla. I know the minus 140 is just a little bit chalky, but the trends favor Betis getting a result on the road. To start, they've been the better team all season in Spain. They're in 6th place. Sevilla's in 15th place, and they're unbeaten in their last 10 in all competitions. Meanwhile, Sevilla has 4 straight draws in the league. I think Betis can go to Seville and win, but with so many draws for Sevilla, I'll take the lesser number, avoid the draw no bet, where I'm going to possibly get the push, and take the double chance where you get a cash on a stalemate, which is something that's been trending between these sides so far this season.
Yeah, and let me piggyback off of that. I think we can come to a consensus here. To me, like, double chance you could play to like the minus 150 range. Like, I feel like minus 150 or better double chance if you believe in that team, obviously. Like, you're turning a draw into a win. I think it's worth the juice. So I don't mind that pick at all.
Yeah, as right. We always say, free money is free money.
Yeah. Exactly, because a draw, if you get cash for a draw versus draw no bet, and you just getting your money back, you're still getting at that half unit or so.
Exactly. I'm going to go to our featured game, Roma Lazio. Like I mentioned, we talked about it enough. I don't need to add on to it, but both teams to score is super playable in this one. It's minus 115. I think both teams do get a goal in this one. I think you could play the over if you were doing that, or a team total, as we mentioned. Both, great options, but both teams to score minus 115, I feel like is maybe the luckiest pick of this match. Scotty even shouted it out. I think this could very potentially be a 1-1 game. I think they both get a goal. Hopefully Lazio gets it first and can carry on to a win, but this is going to be the most fun derby, I think, in 3 years. That's my bold prediction.
Hope so.
All right. Well, speaking of goals, Coach, I think you found our pod lock of the week this week. Yes. Remember, pod lock 9-2 in the season plus 5.2 units. Whoa. Coach, what do we got this week?
I think it's 6. I think it's 6.2.
6.2? Well, then someone did not update the doc.
Yeah.
6.2 units. What is it, Coach? What do we got?
We were scouring. We were looking. We were thinking about Girona, draw no bet over in Spain, league leaders. And then Nick goes, what about a Bundesliga over? Most of them were set at over 3.5, which is, the books start to catch on to the fact that almost every match in the Bundesliga goes over 3 goals, or at least over 2.5 goals at this point in the season. And then I stumbled upon Mainz at Darmstadt, over 2.5 goals at minus 140. Darmstadt has gone over that number in 10 out of 10 matches this season. Mainz has gone over in 8 of their last 9. Darmstadt has conceded 32 times in 10 matches and Mainz 24 times in those 10 matches. The only reason this isn't set at 3.5 is because neither team scores a ton. But when you have defenses that are this porous, I find it hard to believe that we won't get at least 3 goals in this one. I mean, I'd be tempted to play even the over 3, but the over 2.5 at -140 is still a playable number, and it feels inevitable based on the trends with these two sides.
Let's cash this one by halftime.
That would be lovely because it happens in the Bundesliga quite often.
Awesome. All right. Well, that does it for this week's episode. If you are listening to the podcast, we appreciate you listening. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on whatever platform you're on right now to make sure you get every week's episode. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can also hit that subscribe button. Make sure you get all of our videos uploaded every week. Also give us a like or a thumbs up. I think that helps with the algorithm. And if you're really enjoying the podcast, you can find us over on our Patreon, patreon.com/kicksandpicspod. It's $5 a month. You'll get all of our podcasts out early. You get our written works. We do a lot of stuff for Champions League, and we do prop picks on the weekend, so a little bit of extra. But yeah, make sure you find us in all of our places, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
Thank you.